Hey guys, what's up? So this is a video about the pros and cons of Golang. I want to actually get into more detail about some of these languages that I like to talk about on this channel. And some of you guys have asked me about this. A lot of this information is obviously available in different places, but I just went ahead and tried to compile some of this information. Now, I have used Golang. I'm not extensively, but I've jumped in a couple of times, but really have only scratched the surface with the language itself. So I'm not a Golang expert, but my background is more Python, C#, and JavaScript. So what is Go? People call it Go or they call it Golang, but it's a programming language. It's open source. It's sponsored by Google. It's essentially created by Google. So some of the people behind it, like Rob Pike and Ken Thompson, created the original B language. So he goes all the way back to Dennis Ritchie and the C programming language, which is like arguably the most important language of all time. So some of the greatest minds in computer science have actually been behind this language. So they made it so that it was easy to build, simple, reliable, and efficient. So essentially, it was to solve some of the more complex problems in the world of programming, problems that companies like Google run into when they're dealing with petabytes of data that they're sifting through each day. Now, I'm going to start with the pros of Golang. So it's built with concurrency in mind. So that means that they have things like Go routines and channels, which are all built around concurrent programming, and they are considered primitives in the language. And a primitive means that, like a string or a number in Python, those are primitive types to Python. This Go language has its own primitives, just like strings and integers. That they call Go routines and channels, and they're specifically built for concurrency. So concurrency is being able to focus on multiple things at one time. Not parallel programming, but essentially it's similar to parallel programming. And where parallel programming is mostly focused on being able to run things in parallel on multi-cores, you hear a lot about that, like trying to utilize all 4 of your CPU cores. Concurrency is more like being able to run multiple processes at the same time on the same core. I mean, you could have multi-core, so you could have literally 4 separate concurrent applications running, and things are executing simultaneously, basically using switch back and forth between running this, focus on this, switch back to this. So it is actually separate from concurrency, and Rob Pike actually explains that in more detail if you wanted to look up that. He's done videos and stuff like that, but he's one of the creators of the Golang language, and he basically outlines the fact that the world is a parallel place, and object-oriented languages aren't really suited towards concurrency. And with Go, it is focused almost exclusively on that issue, which is a pretty big issue when you're trying to solve very, very complex problems. All right, so Go is cross-platform, so it runs on Windows and also Linux. So I mean, you can actually, that's a big issue that we've seen, obviously, with languages like C#, which are now running cross-platform. But for a language to be truly adoptable, it needs to be able to run on both platforms and Mac as well. So it avoids a lot of the CRUFT of traditional object-oriented languages. And what I mean by that is that, as I said before, object-oriented languages aren't necessarily suited towards multi-core processing and parallelism and concurrency. Although you can do those things, it's a little bit harder. In addition to that, Go also does away with things like classes and type inheritance, which you see in a lot of other different languages. So if those aren't your cup of tea, then you're probably going to like Go quite a bit. So functions are first-class citizens. We've seen this in JavaScript, that functions are just like strings and ints. They're the same thing. They're first class, and you can pass them around like they're parameters and things. You can do the same thing with Go. And one of the pros with Go is that there's generally one way to do just about everything. Now, this could also be a downside because a lot of people say that Golang is somewhat verbose and boring because you're basically laying out the exact same way of doing something. There's no craftiness. There's no let me try to put all this crap on one line like Perl or using JavaScript to do some tomfoolery. I mean, there's typically one way to do it, and Golang, it's the adopted way, and everybody does it that way. And That was kind of Google's entire incentive to do it that way, because they didn't want to have to train all these engineers that they're paying $200,000 a year for to have to run Python in different crafty ways. They wanted things to be super efficient and very easy to follow. So another pro is that it is backed by Google, one of the largest tech companies in the world, and the fact that a lot of those creators actually work directly for Google tells you a lot there. It has garbage collection. Now that's something that is a major pain in the ass to deal with when you're writing in like C++ or in C or any other language that doesn't have garbage collection. In fact, it's one of the reasons why I've never really been able to truly get into C++. It's just having to deal with that and getting accustomed to not having to deal with it. It's a pretty big transition, although it does take away some of your flexibility to be able to write super fast and efficient programs when you don't actually control the memory management. Now let's get into some of the cons of Golang. It lacks third-party modules, so that's just naturally because of the language being only 6 years old, but there's a lot of libraries and things that you use every single day in C# or JavaScript or Python that you've just grown accustomed to. Libraries that are doing things for GUI app development or making HTTP requests or for dealing with JSON data. So many different things that we turn to for, npm quickly install this or pip install that. Those things are missing from Golang, and they will be for probably quite some time to come. It deviates away from traditional C-based languages, and this is actually one of the reasons why I haven't personally adopted Go in a lot of my projects. I don't use Go at work. There's not going to be any sort of possibility of us using Go probably anytime in the near future, maybe ever. And it deviates away in a way where, like, when I read Go, it doesn't look familiar as JavaScript or C or C# or any sort of C-based language, and for that reason, it makes things difficult to actually do something with Go, because I have to basically do a 180 and start thinking in things the Go way, which is very, very opposite from everything else that I do. So I also have here, not as easy to read as Python, and that is just my opinion. That's not even what the community is saying, but for me, I look at Go language and it doesn't click as well as something like Python. Go has tedious error handling, so that's actually one of the you hear a lot of people complaining about that. So the built-in error handling that comes with Go is not extremely helpful. Go has no generics. People have been bitching about this since the language started. So generics allow you to write code that can be reusable by having generic implementations. So that means you're not you're not statically building a function that can only work with a set of data, one piece of data. Having a generic, you can say, I'm going to build this in a generic form so that I can have different types get passed in and different outputs and things like that. So the lack of generics in Go is definitely a problem with the language. After being out for 6 years, adoption is still suspect outside of Google and obviously their engineers. So the community, Stack Overflow, like you look at how many questions are on Stack Overflow or just how many websites are available for any sort of assistance, you can just see that Golang has not really taken off as like something like React, which is a library in JavaScript, but you saw React explode in popularity in just a couple of years, and with Go, I mean, we've been talking about it before it even came out. It's been out for 6 years now, and adoption is still ongoing, but it's just not this there's not this mainstream craze of jumping on the Golang bandwagon. And I think some of it has to do with these cons that I've mentioned. Not very many jobs, so that is a downside, that there's not as much employment opportunity. However, that can also be a positive, because if you focus on one language and you become a master at it, or even very proficient, you're going to be able to find a job probably easier. And finding something that not everybody like overseas and everywhere else are focusing on, it makes you a little bit more attractive to whatever sort of potential employer you may be looking for. You know what I mean? So if you compare that to Java or C#, you're going to be thrown into the mix of like hundreds of thousands of other developers that are all competing for the same positions. Now, granted, there's more positions. There's also a shitload more developers that you're competing against. Not as helpful online as with other languages, and I kind of just mentioned that with Stack Overflow, you're going to have less questions, there's less blogs, and all that stuff is just because there's less adoption. A lot of the people that have adopted it, they're not, they're not. So a lot of them are just systems engineers and things like that. And to me, I don't see the same level of enthusiasm as I saw with like maybe the Python community or the Ruby community or even JavaScript. So that is about it, guys. Let me know what you think of Golang and whether or not you guys have tried it. And I do plan on touching on more languages and frameworks, libraries, and things like that in this format as well. So thanks for watching, guys. Have a good day. Bye. Hey, guys. So a lot of you ask me, how do I get my foot in the door to become a programmer? And I just want to take a moment to mention Dev Mountain Coding Bootcamp is a 12-week intensive course that focuses on the technologies of the here and now for web development. Some of the things that they're actually teaching in this 12-week course, it's geared to get you into the industry by focusing on things like jQuery, Node.js, React, Angular, how to use GitHub. So a lot of the things that you're going to need to do as a developer, as soon as you start, they're going to be teaching you in this coding bootcamp, and the entire goal is to be able to get you into the industry within 12 weeks. So if you guys are interested in learning more information about Dev Mountain Coding Bootcamp, just check out the link in the description tab of this video. Thank you for watching, and have a good day.